Good morning, my name is Josh from CyclonesOZ and welcome to your detailed forecast update for December 18th, 2024. We have a lot to get through today once again with two tropical rain depressions meandering around Queensland. One actually expected to become a tropical low and dump a whole lot of rainfall across the far north of Queensland. We'll talk about the warm temperatures extending across interior parts of Australia and then showers and thunderstorms to the tropical top ends. And we'll also talk about two tropical lows later on into the forecast period. If you are brand new to the channel, please consider subscribing, but let's get stuck straight into things today, which is just a recap on what's happening in central Queensland. So you can see the rainfall depression number one that we've been talking about for the last couple of days, just meandering around the Whitsundays and Hamilton Island at this time. It's not really any more threat. In fact, the worst of the rainfall there has since dissipated, and you can see winds as well really weak around this system, and all of that just wraps up into this system being really weak at this time. Still a couple of showers being funneled ashore down into the St. Lawrence, West Hill and Ogmore sort of area, and they have had some good falls over the last 3 days. Rainfall accumulation have been about par of what they were expected. They were really heavy to kick things off, but then over the last couple of days the rainfall accumulation has either been around what was expected on the forecast or actually slightly below. So all in all, not too bad of a rainfall system. Some places have picked up some great rainfall, some drought quenching rainfall in fact, especially around Gladstone and Agnes Water. More rainfall would certainly be welcome, but for the most part this rainfall depression here has been for more than most people. It has been pretty welcome. So again, we will take that as it is. And we'll leave this rainfall depression behind now. In terms of the forecast, there's not an awful lot on the forecast around this sort of central Queensland area throughout the course of today. A couple of showers and storms could fire themselves up. We'll go into southeastern Queensland and talk about severe thunderstorms shortly. But in terms of significant rainfall accumulations throughout the next couple of hours, nothing really expected for the remainder of today. A couple of heavier showers could pipe up though along the far northern Queensland coastline, which leads us nicely into the next rainfall depression / full-blown tropical low that we're going to have to talk about up over the Cape York Peninsula. And you can see it right now actually on the radar and the satellite imagery. We have a low pressure system now beginning to develop away from Thursday Island and Weeper into the northern parts of the Cape York Peninsula. And this low pressure system here, I mean the convection that is blowing up here is the precursor to the tropical low that's expected to develop and move across the Cape York Peninsula and bring some very heavy rainfall accumulations to the far north of Queensland. We've also had a pretty big flip in how much rainfall is expected and exactly where it is. We've got a lot of detail to get through in the next couple of minutes. Make sure you are ready for it, especially if you do live in the far north of Queensland. It's going to sound a bit more of an information dump as opposed to a forecast. Anyways, we'll start things off in chronological order. You can see the low pressure system wrapping itself up later on this afternoon and evening in the Gulf of Carpentaria away from Weeper, and that's going to be bringing some moderate rainfall to the northern parts of the Cape York Peninsula. There's some isolated heavy falls expected around Moomba and Lockhart River later on tonight, with both places expecting at least 50 millimetres over the next 24 hours. Now this tropical low / rainfall depression will move across the top parts of the Cape York Peninsula, wrap itself up a little bit more throughout the course of tonight into early tomorrow morning, and then the real rainfall is going to start. This is where it's going to drag in an awful lot of tropical moisture from the Coral Sea and just funnel it into Queensland adjacent to wherever the low pressure system is, and you can see it here piping up from early tomorrow morning. For locations along the coast between Lockhart River right down to Cooktown, and even some heavy showers making their way down to Cairns by early tomorrow morning, there is going to be a lot of rainfall. We are talking about very remote far northern Queensland at this time, so again not an awful lot of people are expected to receive impacts by tomorrow morning, but come tomorrow afternoon as this system slowly meanders down the Queensland coastline, the really heavy rainfall gets itself jammed up into the coast between Cooktown and Cairns. We're going to be talking about some very significant falls occurring around the Daintree rainforest, and we're talking about rainfall rates of around 30 millimetres an hour sustaining themselves for 6 to 12 hours at a time, and you do the math on that, you're talking between 150 and 300 millimetres. Some significant rainfall accumulations are possible across the Daintree rainforest later on to tomorrow night and then into early Friday morning, and the rainfall just doesn't really stop until at least Friday evening. You can see that it slowly moves further south, the rainfall clearing out of the Daintree rainforest by Thursday evening and really building on Thursday afternoon for Cairns and then Thursday evening along the Cassowary coast as well, and even significant rainfall accumulations expected around Ingham and Cardwell and then down towards Townsville at least initially on Thursday evening and then into early Friday morning. Now as this low pressure system continues to wrap itself up, the rainfall is expected to peak by around sunrise on Friday, and you guessed it, the wettest location of Australia around the Cassowary coast, Innisfail, Babinda and Tully expected to pick up just a funnel of intense rainfall that's going to be driven ashore here. And again, I would not be surprised if 12-hourly rainfall accumulations were in excess of 300 millimetres. If this doesn't get a severe weather warning for heavy rainfall, I would be very surprised, because we are talking about a tropical rain depression here across the far north of Queensland, and they can dump some incredible rainfall accumulations over a very quick period of time. And just taking a look at this forecast here, I mean, we're talking talking about accumulations between 25 and 40, even up towards 50 or 60 millimeters over a 3-hour period here. And for the forecast to be suggesting that, that means that some very heavy rainfall is on the cards. The good news is that it does move pretty quickly away from the coastline. By Friday afternoon, the tropical low is already starting to swing itself away from the Queensland coastline. As such, it's bringing the heaviest falls slightly offshore. There still will be some very heavy showers around along the cassowary coast and into the far north of Queensland just in general. And there'll also be some isolated pockets of moderate to heavy rainfall around the coastline of Ingham and Cardwell throughout Friday night into early Saturday morning. But this low pressure system makes is definitely in a rush to get itself over the Coral Sea, and it gets itself over there pretty quickly by Friday evening, and it's well on its way, rapidly moving off towards the east by Saturday morning, and you can see pretty much clearing all away from Australia by Saturday afternoon and evening. And that is the big change from yesterday's forecast, where we were suggesting that the system was just going to skirt down the coastline. It has wobbled, or at least the track forecast has wobbled about 100 kilometres to the north, and that is supported by the storm's actual formation. It's formed about 150 or 200 kilometres further north of where we were expecting it. The low pressure system is currently just offshore from Thursday Island. We expect it to be somewhere offshore from Arakan or some of the indigenous communities along the Cape York Peninsula. So as such, the forecast has all been shifted about 150 to 200 kilometres further north in terms of where the intense rainfall is going to be. Now this storm here as such is just not going to be dragging in the moisture that is going to be required to produce some intense rainfall accumulations for locations such as Townsville, Ayr, Bowen, the Whitsundays, and then down towards Mackay. We were expecting accumulations there to be well in excess of 150, potentially up towards 300 millimetres from this system throughout Friday and Saturday, and now I've got to completely revise that and say somewhere between 25 and 30 millimetres is kind of the more likely scenario at this time. Don't get me wrong, the rainfall will continue to pile on around sort of Proserpine and Hamilton Island, especially on Saturday as the system moves further offshore. They're going to be in the box seat here for some significant and heavy showers at times, and just lines of heavy showers to come through. But we're not talking about the torrential tropical rainfall that we were talking about the other day. Now, this is a tropical low as well, so we do also have a wind and a wave threat, and it's going to be an intense low-pressure system, or not an intense low-pressure system, but still a relatively strong one, so those waves and those tides are going to be above average. You can see winds sustained of around 50 kilometres an hour. It's definitely not at tropical cyclone proportions at any point on Friday or Saturday offshore from the Queensland coastline, but we will still be talking about wind gusts in excess of 70 or 80 kilometres an hour, perhaps even a little bit stronger than that outside of Ingham and Cardwell, and then up towards 70 kilometres an hour offshore from Bowen, Hamilton Island, around sort of that 60 kilometre an hour mark. So there will still be some strong and gusty winds here boating around the Whitsunday. Certainly not advised on Friday or Saturday. In fact, just this weekend in general, it's going to be quite uncomfortable indeed. Plenty of clouds, plenty of rainfall, and plenty of wind by the looks of things. So again, make sure you are taking it safe if you do live in and around the water. And again, I highly advise, or I strongly advise against boating. It's just not the weekend for it, this one. Anyways, let's talk about rainfall accumulations, because there is, again, a lot of detail that we need to pump out with the rainfall accumulations topic. So this is just the next 5 days of rainfall, and we're seeing some significant rainfall accumulations here. And I'd also like for you to keep in the back of your head that, especially for far north Queensland, the models can dramatically underestimate what rainfall is expected, and that's just because of the nature of far north Queensland. They're just perfectly set up for significantly higher rainfall accumulations than what the forecast models suggest, and the EastModRev just isn't that high resolution of a model to really crank out the detail across far northern Queensland to give a 100% accurate forecast in terms of rainfall. So the real rainfall is going to be piping up now between Cooktown right down through the far north Queensland and even into the central Queensland coastline. Cooktown itself expecting about 130 millimetres, potentially a little bit more. Woodgel and Port Douglas, depending on what rainfall comes ashore, somewhere between 150 and 220 millimetres is a number that I would expect for them. Some of the wetter accumulations in the Daintree rainforest around Mossman could be into the 300 millimetre kind of ballpark. Cairns expecting about 200 millimetres as well. I do kind of feel that might be a little bit bullish for Cairns, just considering their slightly protected nature from systems like this, but we will have to kind of play it by ear and see what rainfall falls there. I'd say a good number for Cairns would probably be around 125 to 150 millimetres, again most of that coming through Friday morning, but yeah, certainly nonetheless some good rainfall expected there. Out in the tablelands, Atherton, Mareeba and Ravenshoe expecting about between 130 and 180 millimetres apiece. I reckon on the higher end of that around Atherton and Mareeba, and then along the Cassowary coast as well, Innisfail and Tully expecting at least 250 millimetres, even though this forecast doesn't necessarily suggest it. I would be shocked if locations around Innisfail and Tully didn't pick up 250 millimetres to the 9 AM on Monday morning over the next 5 days. There's going to be some really heavy rainfall from this weather event, and it will most likely cause some minor riverine flooding in some of these locations. So again, we will have to very much keep an eye on what rainfall does fall up here, and there'll be secondary updates as necessary throughout the day, because this certainly is going to be a significant rainfall event. In fact, this will be the wettest period that Queensland has received for a good couple of months. Around Ingham and Cardwell, at least 150 millimetres apiece as well. The rainfall just will not be as heavy as we were expecting in yesterday's forecast update. Still, though, some good falls expected Friday morning and into the afternoon hours of Friday as well. Townsville is a really hard sell. This forecast here really made me scratch my head for a good couple of minutes, but again, somewhere between sort of that 30 and 80 millimetre mark. It depends on what showers come through for the Townsville area. If they get a band of heavy showers, boom, you're almost at 100 millimetres there. So we will have to wait and see what rainfall actually does materialise on the radar for Townsville, but somewhere around sort of the 30 to 50 millimetres, I don't think you could go wrong. That's certainly a conservative estimate at this time, but even if the rainfall doesn't pipe up around there, Townsville should still get around 30 millimetres over the next 5 days, and I know that is a drop in the ocean for Townsville, but it is better than nothing. Area expecting about 100 millimetres as well. They're a little bit more exposed to the coast, or at least some of the more coastal areas of area a bit more exposed to the coast, and as such a little bit more rainfall expected there. And then around Proserpine and Hamilton Island, again very exposed to the coastline as well from showers that will be streaming through on Friday night into Saturday morning. At least 80 millimetres expected there. I kind of don't see a situation where some of the coastal areas don't pick up 100 millimetres over the next 5 days around sort of this area. Mackay, a very difficult forecast, probably somewhere around the 40 to 50 millimetre mark, even though this forecast suggests more. And then, of course, jammed up against the mountains around Serena, West Hill and Clairview, some great falls expected down there from showers up towards 150 millimetres, and that is a pretty reasonable forecast as well. And just to give you the idea of how much rainfall is expected to fall around the centre of this system, we're talking about accumulations maxing out at 720 millimetres here. Now, of course, that is not likely to happen across the far north of Queensland, but it gives you an idea of the intensity of the rainfall that this system is going to be bearing. It's going to have some very intense falls in it, and coupled with thunderstorms, we're going to see some very heavy rainfall. I reckon maximum 5-day rainfall accumulations will be around sort of the 350 millimetre mark, and if I had to put a location on it, it'd either be South Mission Beach or Tongue Oil Alert. They pick up some incredible rainfall accumulations there time and time again. We will have to wait and see what they pick up. I reckon they're going to get some really impressive rainfall accumulations over the next couple of days. If you're in and around far north Queensland and this forecast hasn't been good enough for you, then please let me know in the comment section down below. I'd be more than happy to help you out with another forecast tailored to yourself in the comment section down below. Make sure you are staying safe in a weather event like this, heeding all warnings from the Bureau of Meteorology in your local Shire office. This is a weather event to take seriously. I know that the rainfall might not sound too impressive for some locations along the far north coast of Queensland, but this is certainly something to take pretty seriously, that's for sure. There'll be another update on this system later on this afternoon as well, so make sure you are subscribed for that. Let's head down south into the southeastern corner of Queensland as well. We do have a couple of thunderstorms that I do want to be talking about, especially the ones later on this afternoon and evening. We could see the chance of potentially severe thunderstorms firing up as a low pressure system develops around the Brisbane area later on this afternoon and evening. Now, of course, this low pressure system is a weak one. In fact, it'd be a bit of a stretch to call it a low pressure system, but there will be a surface trough providing the optimum conditions for thunderstorms to fire up into the immediate northeastern corner of New South Wales and the southeastern corner of Queensland. It's been pretty dry in terms of thunderstorms over the last couple of weeks through here, and it looks like we might see a couple of good thunderstorms to break that later on this afternoon and evening. So premium conditions for thunderstorms, convective available potential energy values into the 2000s once again, which is pretty healthy. Most of this happening around Ipswich, Boonah and Beaudesert. So again, not looking too bad here, and then further inland out towards St George, Goondiwindi and Inverell as well, some decent Cape values too. So the conditions aren't looking horrible for severe thunderstorms to fire up. Then again, they're not looking absolutely premium at this time. The humidity values could do with a little bit of work around sort of 60 to 70%, and I mean that is still good, but for severe thunderstorms to fire up, you want to be well into the 70s and up into the 80s. So again, we will have to wait and see what happens here. If severe thunderstorms do fire up, they're gonna likely take their merry time to become problems in terms of rainfall. They're going to really take their time to develop and materialise before they become rain-making messes. Temperatures as well not looking too bad across the southeast of Queensland. They're sort of into the kind of the high 20s and early 30s. Again, not fantastic for severe thunderstorms, but still not looking too bad. So for severe thunderstorm lovers, it's not looking like an amazing forecast for you, but it isn't also looking like a bad forecast for you in terms of potentially severe thunderstorms. Let's turn this over into a convective forecast model in terms of where the most intense storms are going to be. It is a little bit hard to pick out, but I reckon on the coastal strip and just outside of sort of Brisbane, just towards the west of Brisbane, we're expecting some good thunderstorms there. Between the line of Boonah up to about Gympie, some good thunderstorms expected. And I reckon there'll also be some good thunderstorms just outside of the Gold Coast up towards Coomera as well, especially those storms there likely to have a little bit more rainfall and a little bit more likely to fire up later on into the evening as well. Some good thunderstorms are also expected to fire up around Goondiwindi later on into the afternoon and evening. They could have some pretty heavy rainfall in them as well, and then the thunderstorms that do fire up earlier on into the afternoon, sort of around that 2 to 3 p.m. mark, by around 5 p.m. they will mature into some significant rain producers here and get flushed out towards the north and the northwest. So some significant thunderstorms do look possible on this forecast, but they're not overly likely at this time, and I reckon more people are likely to be not impacted by these systems than they are likely to be impacted by them. If you're in Brisbane, I wouldn't get your hopes up. Same deal with the Gold Coast as well, but around Coomera and then up into the parts of the Sunshine Coast and especially towards the west of Brisbane, I wouldn't write this off entirely right now. In terms of the chance of Toowoomba getting severe thunderstorms, again, not looking likely, but I wouldn't completely write your chances off right now. The best chances are actually out towards Goondiwindi and St. George and Thallon. There are going to be some good storms out there, but again, I wouldn't get your hopes up for widespread severe thunderstorms. It's a pretty kind of touch and go forecast for them. They could fire up in dramatic fashion, or they could completely fall on their face and flop. Alright, now that is more than enough Queensland for this forecast update. I'm sure pretty much everyone will agree with me there. And just in terms of the 14-day rainfall accumulations, where we can now see out into 2025, Wednesday the 1st of January 2025 now on the 14-day forecast. That's a scary thought that we've got less than 2 weeks left of 2024. Did not see that coming this early. In terms of rainfall though, nothing's standing out to me across WA, the Northern Territory, South Australia or New South Wales, Victoria. In fact, Tasmania's looking the wettest out of pretty much all of the states that I've just mentioned here, bar some tropical regions across the Western Australia and the Northern Territory. So again, thunderstorms not looking too prevalent across the interior, but what is going to be prevalent is that awful heat, and it is going to get stinking hot in the lead up to Christmas, for which we are just a week away from now. In terms of the hot weather though, it certainly is going to get quite warm later on this afternoon and evening as well. Western Australia, we're expecting tops of around 40 to 42 into parts of the Wheatbelt, 44 into the Murchison and up towards 45 into the Pilbara region. Northern Territory as well, tops around 44, around sort of Tennant Creek, that sort of area. And those temperatures are just going to continue to rise. They rise dramatically first over in the west. We're expecting tops of up towards 47 degrees on both Thursday and Friday, and then in towards Saturday as well, and then these temperatures slowly slide further towards the east through the Northern Territory, South Australia, Queensland and New South Wales throughout the course of this weekend. Just before we go and talk about the longer range temperature forecast outside of Pannawonica, temperatures up towards 49 degrees on what's this Saturday afternoon, and then on to Sunday as well, temperatures up towards 49 along the coast outside of Onslow, and then I believe this might be a little glob of 50 degree temperatures outside of Carnarvon, or not quite, but it will be very close to 50 degrees there on the forecast. And to have that suggested on the close range forecast, I mean, that is something that's really hot even for them, and no one can tell me otherwise. 49 degrees, I mean, that's oven type temperatures, that is. Saturday, tops of 39 expected for Perth and up towards 40 for Perth on Sunday, so it is going to get quite warm there quite quickly, and then it's going to be the eastern states turn in the lead up to Christmas. Brisbane a top of 30 degrees on Monday. That's going to be a pretty muggy top as well. In fact, temperatures still well into the high 30s around Perth as well on Monday, and then Christmas Eve, finally those temperatures kind of break away for Perth. A top of 26 degrees expected on the 24th of Perth, 30 degrees expected into Brisbane on the 24th as well, and then it will be the eastern states' turn to experience the heat by the looks of things after Christmas. You can see it's going to be a warm day across interior parts of Australia on Christmas Day. Perth a top of 22, Melbourne a top of 20, Adelaide is probably going to be the warmest major capital city with a top of 31 degrees, and then Hobart a very cool top of 15, Sydney and Brisbane a top into the mid-20s, Darwin a top of 32. So again, temperatures aren't going to be especially warm around the major cities, but we're still a week away, and it's still quite a lot of variables, especially over east, for the forecast to kind of nail down. Some warm temperatures expected to be swept across the country into Boxing Day and then on to the 27th as well. In fact, a very warm day expected across parts of New South Wales and Queensland onto the 27th, and then that heat finally slowly starting to dissipate over east on the 28th and the 29th. It will still be warm, but it won't exactly be blisteringly hot. Christmas Christmas forecasts start tomorrow, so make sure you are subscribed for that. There's still quite a lot of details that need to be ironed out in terms of the Christmas weather forecast as well, but it's starting to look a little bit more clear, and unfortunately for a lot of people it's not looking very hot unless you live across Central Australia, in which case it's looking stifling. And just to wrap this video up, I would like to talk about a couple of weak low pressure systems that are expected to develop in our tropical waters adjacent to WA and Queensland. So later on in the forecast period after Christmas, we have had the rumbles of tropical low developing south of Indonesia or offshore from Western Australia around sort of the 26th or the 27th, and it looks like that system here has picked up a little bit more forecast model support overnight. But in terms of support for it becoming a tropical cyclone, not only is the atmosphere going to be against it, but all the forecast models are also against it becoming a tropical cyclone as well. And as such, I really don't think this system has a hot chance of becoming a tropical cyclone, but we will have to wait and see. I mean, it is this time of the year for tropical cyclones, but it doesn't look like an awful lot's going to happen with this system here. And then heading into the New Year period as well, nothing over in Western Australia, and hardly anything as well over in the Coral Sea either. We did have a weak rumble of activity yesterday from a monsoon trough that's expected to extend between PNG down towards New Caledonia and Vanuatu, and you can see it here around sort of Christmas time, a tropical cyclone expected to spin itself up by the Axis G3 forecast, but I would take this with a very heavy pinch of salt. I think this is the Axis G3 just spinning up a little bit of clown stuff around sort of Christmas time. I highly doubt this system will develop here, and the Bureau of Meteorology also giving it no support either, so you can make a good assumption that they're not really trusting the Axis G3 either at this time, and I don't necessarily blame them for that. The GFS does actually call for a bit of a spin up offshore from New Caledonia, but that's in relation to the system that's going to be coming off Queensland that we talked about in the start of this forecast update. So again, we will have to wait and see. It looks like the Coral Sea, rather, not the tropical sea. The Coral Sea might have a chance of spinning up a couple of tropical lows sometime in the next week or so, but again, I wouldn't be overly confident for tropical cyclone activity at this time. We're going to be waiting a couple more weeks at least. There's nothing on the long range either, so all in all, looking pretty disappointing across parts of the northern parts of Australia, and in fact, it's looking pretty dry as we head into the New Year period as well. All in all, though, that is today's forecast update. If you have enjoyed it, then please do let me know in the comment section down below, and leave a like on the video while you're at it. If you haven't already, then please consider subscribing as well. I'm going to go into great detail later on this afternoon as well for Queensland and their rainfall events, so stick around for the secondary update there. The first one was very well received, so we will go into great detail about that once again. A special shout out to the channel sponsors. Their names are on screen right now. Again, I could not run this show without them, and their support is also much appreciated. But that is all for me today, and I'll catch you all in the next storm. Goodbye.